You don't love staying home as much as you think you do. And that's not an insult. It's a question. Because for some people, staying home is peace. And for others, it's protection. And those two things can look identical from the outside. Same quiet, same routine, same canceled plans. But underneath, completely different reasons. So the real question isn't, do you like staying home? It's this, why does it feel so necessary? Let's start with something simple. Think about the last time you canceled plans. Not because you had to, but because you wanted to. There's that moment, right after you cancel, where something in your body softens, your shoulders drop, your breathing slows, and you feel relief, not guilt, not hesitation. Relief. That moment matters more than you think, because that feeling isn't random. It's information. Your body is telling you something about what it just avoided, and most people never stop long enough to ask, what exactly did I just escape from? Because here's where it gets interesting. Not all staying home is the same. Some people stay home because it restores them. Others stay home because the outside world drains them faster than they can recover. And those are two very different systems at work. One is choice. The other is adaptation. Let's break that down. There are people who can go out, talk, engage, be present, and then come home and feel complete. And then there are people who go out, and even if everything goes well, they come back feeling off, not upset, not anxious, just depleted, like something got used up and didn't fully come back. If that sounds familiar, you're not imagining it. That's not personality, that's energy regulation. There's a concept in psychology called optimal stimulation. Some people need more input to feel alive, others need less. And if you fall on the lower end of that spectrum, the modern world can feel like too much, too loud, too fast, too constant, too demanding. So your system does something very intelligent. It starts looking for environments where it can recover. And for most people, that place becomes home. At home, nothing is required from you. No performance, no constant response, no subtle pressure to be on. And that matters more than people realize. Because a lot of social interaction, even good interaction, requires a level of monitoring. You're tracking tone, reading expressions, adjusting your responses, managing impressions. Even when it's automatic, it's still effort. And over time, that effort adds up. This is why you can enjoy being with people and still feel exhausted afterward. Those two things don't contradict each other. You can like the experience and still pay a cost for it. And if that cost isn't balanced with recovery, your system starts making decisions for you. Quiet ones, subtle ones, like choosing home more often. Not because you hate people, but because your body remembers how it felt last time. Now here's where most people misunderstand themselves. They think, I'm just introverted. But that label is too simple, because what you're experiencing might not just be introversion. It might be accumulation. Think about your typical day. Work, expectations, deadlines, messages, noise, decisions, even small things stack up. And if you go long enough without true recovery, your system shifts. At first, it pushes through. You stay functional. You stay engaged. You keep showing up. But eventually, something changes. Not dramatically, quietly. You stop looking forward to things. Plans feel heavier. Not because they're bad, but because your capacity is lower. And when that happens, your body starts prioritizing something else. Not stimulation. Stability. That's when home stops being just a preference and starts becoming a refuge. A place where your system can finally come back down. But there's another layer to this, and this one is easy to miss. For some people, it's not just about energy. It's about control out in the world. You don't control much. The noise, the pace, other people's behavior, unexpected changes, social dynamics. There's always an element of unpredictability. And for certain nervous systems, unpredictability feels like pressure, even if nothing bad happens. At home, that disappears. You control the environment, the lighting, the sound, the timing, the pace, and that sense of control translates into safety, not logically, physiologically. Your body relaxes because it knows Nothing unexpected is about to demand something from you. Now imagine what happens if someone has spent enough time in environments that felt overwhelming, or draining, or emotionally unpredictable. Their system learns something, not consciously, but through repetition. It learns. Out there costs energy. Here feels safe. And once that association is formed, it sticks. This is where staying home starts to feel less like a choice and more like a default. But we're not done yet, because there's a third layer that explains something most people don't talk about. Some people don't just feel better at home. They feel more like themselves. Think about that for a second. Out in the world, you adapt, you adjust, you respond, you filter, you translate who you are. But at home, none of that is necessary. You don't have to perform. You don't have to translate your thoughts. You don't have to simplify who you are. And for certain people, that difference is significant, because the version of them that exists at home feels more real than the version that exists outside. That's why solitude can feel so powerful, not because it removes people, but because it removes distortion. And this is where something interesting happens. People who enjoy being alone often develop a very strong internal world. They think deeply. They process more. They reflect more. They connect ideas in ways that require uninterrupted space. And that's not a weakness. In many cases, it's where creativity comes from. Some of the most original ideas don't come from constant interaction. They come from stillness, from long stretches of uninterrupted thought, from environments where the mind isn't reacting, but exploring. So when someone chooses to stay home, it doesn't always mean they're disengaging from life. Sometimes they're engaging with it more deeply, just internally. But here's where we need to shift, because everything we've talked about so far sounds positive, and often it is. But there's a point where something subtle changes. And this is the part most people don't notice until much later. At first, staying home feels restorative. You cancel plans and feel better. You spend time alone and feel clearer. Your energy comes back. Your mind settles. Everything works the way it should. But over time, something shifts, and it doesn't announce itself. It just creeps in. You stop looking forward to going out, not because you're tired, but because nothing out there feels compelling anymore. Invitations start to feel like obligations. Even when they're not, you begin choosing comfort, not just for recovery, but by default. And this is the moment where a line gets crossed, not dramatically, gradually, because what used to be recovery starts becoming avoidance. And the difficult part is, it still feels reasonable. There's no obvious problem. You're not in crisis. You're just staying in more. But here's the cost. When your environment stops changing, your internal experience starts repeating. Same thoughts, same patterns, same emotional loops. And without external contrast, your perspective narrows. Days start blending together. Time feels less distinct. And slowly, your world becomes smaller. Not safer, just smaller. This is where a lot of people get stuck, because nothing feels urgent enough to change. But something important is missing. Movement. Not constant movement. Not overwhelming change. Just enough interaction with the outside world to keep your system flexible. Because your nervous system doesn't just need safety. It needs range. And when that range disappears, even comfort can start to feel flat. Now let's talk about something that makes this even harder. Shame. At some point, a thought starts forming, quietly. I should be doing more. I shouldn't feel this way. Something's wrong with me. And once that thought appears, it changes everything. Because now, staying home isn't just a preference. It becomes something you judge. You start comparing yourself to people who seem more active, more social, more alive. And the more you compare, the more you withdraw. Not because you want to, but because shame is isolating by design. It tells you to step back, to stay quiet, to not be seen until you fix yourself. And now, the very thing that once helped you starts reinforcing the pattern. This is why understanding the reason behind your behavior matters so much. Because without that clarity, you treat everything the same. But not all solitude is equal. Here's a better question to ask yourself. When you stay home, what happens afterward? Do you feel clearer? More grounded? More like yourself? Or do you feel stuck, restless, disconnected? Because that difference tells you everything. If it restores you, it's regulation. If it shrinks you, it's protection that's gone too far. And the solution isn't to force yourself into the opposite extreme. That's where most advice gets it wrong. You don't need to suddenly become more social, more outgoing, more on. You just need to reintroduce movement in a way your system can tolerate. Small, intentional exposure, a short walk, a quiet environment, one meaningful interaction, not 10. Because balance doesn't come from intensity. It comes from consistency. You don't rebuild your connection to the world overnight. You rebuild it gradually. And here's the part most people need to hear. You don't have to give up your love for staying home. That's not the goal. Home can still be your base, your reset point, your place to think, to recover, to create. But it shouldn't be the only place you feel okay. Because when that happens, you're not choosing it anymore. You're depending on it. And those are not the same thing. You're allowed to enjoy quiet. You're allowed to need space. You're allowed to prefer depth over noise. But you're also allowed to expand again, slowly, on your terms, without forcing yourself into something that doesn't fit. Because this was never about fixing you. It was about understanding what your system learned and deciding whether it still needs to hold on to it. And once you see that clearly, you get your choice back. If this helped you understand something you've been feeling but couldn't explain, then that's exactly the point of this channel. To make these patterns visible, without judgment, without pressure, so you can work with them instead of against them. If you want more conversations like this, grounded, practical, and actually useful, consider subscribing. And if something in this resonated with you, share your experience in the comments. These discussions matter more when they're shared. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next video.